Thank you all so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited to speak to you today about our work so far. So I'm Eleanor Buvel Mather, and I'm an undergraduate computer science student at Georgia Tech. And I'm working with Professor Neha Kumar at the Tandem Lab at Georgia Tech. She's the head of the Tandem Lab at Georgia Tech, and I'm being mentored on the project by Vishal Sharma, who's a PhD candidate, and Pejman Mirza Bave, who's consulting us from the Ontario Institute of Technology. And he's an expert in the game development research space, so that's been wonderful as well. So I'm very grateful all around. So as has already been discussed a little bit earlier, generative artificial intelligence sort of promises like an automation of creative tasks, but it also raises concerns about being replaced, like the thought of human creativity being replaced. There are anxieties about that, and there's research has already been done on game developer reactions to these tools, but we're going to be extending this research by looking at the larger ecology of workers in game development. So not just programmers, also programmers, designers, artists, and writers, sort of seeing the interaction of all these different types of work and the types of tools that they use and or react to, that sort of thing. Generally, our research questions are: how do workers involved in the game development ecosystem perceive the increasing integration of generative AI into their workflows? And how might their creative capabilities be responsibly supported and augmented via generative AI? In short, how might generative AI be designed to mediate game development workflows in ways that are most helpful? I guess I'm going to talk a little more about myself. Okay, I'm in the back here. That's the, so I participated in the local independent developer community. I've been on leadership and I've been a team lead of Georgia Tech's video game development club in the past. And I've kept in touch with alumni who have moved on to the industry. I've also participated in ATL game dev community meetups to sort of keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on around there. And those are great fun. I recommend them. Everyone's very friendly and kind. And I've personally noticed, different opinions and anxieties about these tools, and it's sort of hard to parse, it's hard to parse, if everyone, it's hard to parse, in a group setting, what anxieties are more generalized, or what's just hype and what's actually useful to people, that sort of thing. So I wanted to, ask people specifically and get their insight on the perspectives of people who work on games and would be asked to use these tools and how they are in practice. So our methods, we're conducting surveys and interviews with game developers all over North America. So through the survey, we're collecting data from a broader audience, and we're also using it as a screening tool for more detailed interviews. Those are semi-structured interviews. And we want to examine the developers' perspectives and use of generative AI, as well as responsible ways to integrate it into the game development ecosystem. Before I move on, so these are preliminary results. We've done about 11 interviews so far, and we've begun the qualitative analysis process for around the first half of them. But as we get more data and as we look at the data more, with the way theming goes, is that sometimes you get more context and you think something goes into one category, and we might have more specific details and results later on as we get more data. Okay, well, thank you so much for your patience. All right, so I guess I want to start off with some of the positive changes to workflow. So generally, when people have used generative AI and they found it to be useful, it's usually during the brainstorming process or the conception process, especially with independent developers. Solo devs especially enjoyed sort of having the support that would normally require another person, and if they were going to work alone anyway, these tools have been helpful. Generally, there's a focus on, it's either easing some of these tasks or it has made the process all around faster. And then there are also negative and neutral impacts on workflow. So there are still some occasions where, especially with image generation or like asset creation, where let's say, for example, you want an image or an asset to work in a very specific context in a game. A lot of participants sort of find that, oh, I want this 2D image to fit this art style, and they constantly get, a 3D rendering, or they get something in like a slightly adjacent art style, and it takes longer to edit it. That sort of thing. Oh, and similarly, with some programming tools, a lot of programmers reported that, specifically using tools like ChatGPT to help with programming problems that they would have looked up on Stack Overflow has been very helpful, but like code generation tools like Copilot can be hit or miss, where sometimes it can hallucinate and sort of get in the way. So there's been mixed results in that regard. Also, among participants who did or didn't use generative AI tools, of course, as has already been brought up, there are a lot of anxieties and ethical concerns about the implications of some of these tools in terms of like job environment and how jobs might look different. And actually, we get more into that in one of the later themes. Is that even among people who use tools and enjoy using these tools, there's sort of a lot of individuals sort of create ground rules for themselves. So it's like sort of like, oh, I use generative AI tools for X, but I would never use it for Y. And there's sort of this idea of, oh, I want to make it clear that I wouldn't use it in a finished product, or some participants are like, oh, I wouldn't use it for creative work. So there sort of tends to be like ground rules that have started to be made, though everyone has a slightly different idea of what those are, like what they're comfortable using and what they think is useful. In particular, artists, especially artists who worked on who work with indie devs, are often, they usually do commissions or do individual work outside of it. They sort of have had trouble keeping their portfolios public due to data scraping in the environment. So a lot of artists have sort of introduced like glazing all their artworks into their workflow. So now all of their artworks have that filter on them. Similarly, there's sort of anxieties about what might be done with their art. For example, one participant talked about how, an artist died and immediately someone made like a model using that artist's art style. So there are new concerns about, not just, someone will copy and paste a commission I did and then say it's their own. It's like, someone's going to make a model off of my work after I die. Like there's sort of a different higher level of anxiety around stuff like that. I will say some participants have been in the position where they sort of can hire people, and apparently there's sort of a shift in artist attitudes towards if a job explicitly says they won't use their art to train if it seems to be that it's a given. Some artists see that it's a given that their art may be used for some of these models, and they're a little bit concerned about that. So there's almost a sense of relief when there's something in the contract saying that it won't, or if they would get compensated for it. So there's definitely a change. There are more anxieties and more things that artists have had to think about, especially in independent development. Though we have heard from some participants who work in like AA and AAA environments where they're sort of being encouraged to implement these tools into their workflow as well. Though we haven't gotten as much data on that so far. So. Also, speaking of anxiety, this is sort of anxiety outside of the context of, job-related anxiety. It's like even among users that use it often, there tends to be this thing where they may use it, but they say like outside of saying, I use it for this but not for that, there tends to be this anxiety about, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if it can do this. I wonder if it'll replace this task. And then similarly, in a different vein, actually, some people who use these tools are sort of afraid of saying that they use it because they're worried they'll be, let's say, for example, someone might use the tool for like concept art or to help them brainstorm, and they're worried that if they say that, someone else may assume that they use it like in their finished product. And especially since a lot of independent developer communities are online, they're worried about online harassment, among other things. So there's sort of an increased sense of anxiety in some communities, especially independent developer communities. So of course these are just preliminary findings, and I'm really excited to look at more, to interview more people and look at more of the data. But so we hope that this exploratory research will contribute to forming a deeper understandings of more responsible ways to integrate generative AI. I think our goals are to sort of, if we're going to use these tools, it's best to use them in ways that are most helpful to the people that are going to use them, and that really not only sort of makes things more efficient, but also sort of makes, because if people don't, it's a lot of, sorry, I'm stumbling over. So I guess we want to make sure we integrate it in a way that doesn't feel haphazard, or, oh, we introduce this tool and, oh, half the team doesn't use it because it gets in the way of what they're doing, or half the team doesn't even want to use it because of this, or it's best to understand how people are going to react before introducing these things. I want to thank Vishal Sharma, the PhD candidate in human-centered computing in the Tanab Lab, who taught me where to begin with conducting this research project. I want to give thanks to Professor Pejman Mirza Bave for bringing us expertise and insight on game development. And without Professor Neha Kumar's advising, I would definitely not be here right now. And I would love to hear feedback from all of you, from you all moving forward with this research project. We've conducted 11 or so interviews, and our goal is 15, but more would be amazing also. So if you have any advice on recruitment, or with conducting interviews and things like that, I would love to hear it, or any other comments would be amazingly welcome. Also, I do have, if you know anyone who would like to take the survey or participate in the study, feel free to forward their contact info to me if that is quite all right. Yeah, but but I'm totally open to questions, and I hope I haven't, well, thank you so much again. Oh, yeah.
So it seems that you have examples where the communities are sort of self-policing and hating people out that are using it. And I wonder if those people are forming their own AI positive communities.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, oh, since there's self-policing in communities, are people who use these tools creating their own sub-communities where they may be able to talk about using these tools freely? I think it's been tricky, because I think a lot of people who use the tools and are worried about talking about it tend to be in much smaller teams, if not teams of one, and they tend to. It seems to be. There's definitely. The atmosphere seems to be, oh, I talked to this person who I trust, who is a friend of mine, as opposed to, oh, I post about this online in this forum. Though it's definitely something that I'd want to ask more about moving forward. I think it's tricky, because a lot of the participants were pretty open about their use, depending on how they used it. It's sort of it's definitely, it's hard to gauge with the amount of participants we've had so far that have had that experience, because it's been yes, but that's definitely something I want to keep in mind. So thank you for asking that. Oh yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it has come up before. So the question was oh, do different workers in the field have different perspectives on generative AI? Like, for example, are programmers more receptive, or artists more receptive? Something I found that was sort of interesting is that, among both artists and programmers, at least so far, is that their opinions on generative AI were relatively consistent, but it was sort of oh, an artist may say, oh, I think it's pretty okay if a programmer does it for this, but I don't really want to use it for art. And a programmer may say, oh yeah, I use it for programming help sometimes, but I wouldn't use it for visual art. And then someone who uses it for a little bit of everything may say, oh, I'm fine with using, it doesn't necessarily, there didn't seem to be too much of a difference between roles necessarily. That was interesting, but there was a trend where people were more okay, people who didn't want to use these tools for visual art generally were totally okay with it being used in programming, and vice versa. So I thought that was interesting, and I appreciate that question.
Do we have any other questions? We still have some time.
Oh, thank you so much. Also, thank you so much thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to see everyone else's presentations.